Hi guys, so let's say you're going to a party in the next few days and you want to bring some food. This would be that thing to bring to that party. This is a version of pecan pie that is sweet and smoky and has such a unique flavor. Essentially, it's just pecan pie with some extra special Laphroaig added. For those who are unaware, Laphroaig is a very smoky, peaty scotch, and I've heard the flavor described as tasting like a log cabin burned down in your mouth. Although I'm not a huge scotch connoisseur, I really like this stuff. And my discovery that this is an amazing thing to do to a regular pecan pie was a pleasant and amazing surprise. So let's try to make it. So as I said, this is essentially pecan pie, but with scotch. So we actually need to start with making the pecan pie. The first thing we need to do is actually pour ourselves a glass of scotch, and so skull. The second thing we need to do is make a crust. Feel free to use a pre-made crust if you want, but I'm going to make my own, so I'm going to show you how I will make my own pie crust. And how I do that is essentially follow Chef John's exact recipe, which requires 340 grams or about 12 ounces of flour, 250 grams of butter, and for this butter, we actually need it frozen. So I've had mine in the freezer for just 30 minutes is fine. And we can get small pieces by grating it on a cheese grater. And once we have all these nice little bits, we can throw them in with our flour. To that, we need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And at this point, I'm already gonna start mixing the dough by hand, trying not to warm it too much with my hands, but I just wanna mix the butter shreds with the flour so we can get some buttery clumps. Next, we need about 50 milliliters of water and 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. So slowly add this stuff to the flour and begin mixing it. Try not to knead it too much because we really don't want to form any gluten here. Once it starts to come together, we're good. Just go ahead and stop. We can separate it into 2 clumps and basically cover these clumps and put them into the refrigerator for 30 minutes or up to a few days, whatever works for your schedule. Okay, so the next step, let's actually prep the pie. Now, if you're a normal person, I would recommend buying pre-shelled pecans, but if you want to save €2 and put way more work into this than necessary, you can also attempt to peel your own pecans, as I did. And I also don't own a nutcracker because I'm kind of a barbarian, so this got a little bit brutal with the hammer. I was able to get it right sometimes, but I just recommend shelling out the extra cash for the pre-shelled pecans. In any case, we need 250 grams or 2 cups of the shelled pecans, preferably halves if you can find them. So once that's done, we can actually move on with our pie dough. So what we need to do here is actually just roll these balls out. I think I screwed up the amount of water in mine, so I don't think they're going to be as easy to roll out as yours will be. So once we rolled out one of the clumps, we can put it into our pie tin and move on to the next stage. To make sure that we have a nicely cooked pie crust, we need to do something called a blind bake. This is just a process of cooking the dough a little bit before we actually put the filling in. This will prevent the dough from being raw and will make the final product a whole lot nicer and crunchier. To do this, it's really simple. Just grab some parchment paper to place inside of there and then just throw some dried beans in there, or chickpeas as I'm using. This will just weigh the dough down so it doesn't puff up too much when it starts to get cooked. Once you have the dried beans and parchment paper in there, you can just go ahead and put this into your oven, which should be around 175 degrees Celsius or about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to put it in there and leave it in there for about 20 minutes. Now, while the pie is blind baking, we can prepare the filling, which is actually pretty simple. It's mostly just gathering the ingredients. We need 320 grams or about 1 1/3 cup of granulated white sugar, 175 grams or about 1.5 cups of dark corn syrup. We need 120 grams or about 1 stick of butter, and 80 milliliters or about 1/3 cup of milk. We can just toss in some vanilla, and lastly, but certainly not least, we have our Laphroaig. Now, I'm using some Laphroaig quarter cask, but any Islay, I'm really bad at this, Islay style whiskey should work here. Thankfully, we only need a splash, so you don't have to sacrifice too much. So we need about 20 milliliters. You can add a little bit more if you want it to be a little bit more smoky, but it's really up to you here. So once we've gathered everything into our pot, we can just begin heating this mixture. Now, because I didn't want to move my setup too much, we're going to use the trusty, rusty portable burner, and we're going to need to heat this mixture up until it starts boiling and coming together, which should take about 5 minutes, that's all. Once it comes up to heat and starts boiling, we'll let it boil for about a minute and then take it off the burner to cool down. Meanwhile, make sure to have a timer and keep track of your pie crust. It should be done about now. So you can remove the pie from the oven and carefully take the beans out, making sure not to spill them all over the place. If you want to go the extra mile, you can put it back into the oven to add some extra color and toastiness to the dough, but I was feeling lazy. So let's go back to the syrup. It's cooled now for a few minutes while we remove the pie crust from the oven. And now we can actually add it to 3 eggs. And because it's still warm, we want to avoid scrambling the eggs, and we're going to do something called tempering it. So slowly add in some of the syrup to raise the temperature of the eggs. And once about 1/3 is added, we can go a little bit faster and adding more and more together, making sure it just doesn't get too hot. Now that that's done, we can put this whole mess of a pie together. First thing we need to do is put the pecans into the pie shell, and then secondly, we just pour the syrupy egg mixture, making sure to get all of the pecans covered in that delicious goop. Place this pie back into the 175-degree oven and let it bake for 40 minutes, or approximately 2 episodes of BoJack Horseman. After which we can pull it out and let it cool, and in which case it should be done. This is it, and it may seem like a lot of work, but it's really a beautiful and delicious dish, and it really isn't a lot of work. It looks like a lot more than it actually is. It's sure to enthrall all of those who eat it. Lastly, I would like to advertise some of my girlfriend's new content. She's actually a classical musician, and she just uploaded a video of herself playing. So if you have any interest or inclination towards watching that, I have the link here, so feel free to go over there and watch that. Bye!